This video is about gates. If you have not yet watched the video about compressors, make sure you first watch this one, because the concept of gates is heavily related to the concept of compressors. So what is a gate? In compressors, we did make signals quieter, or we did turn down signals which passed a certain threshold. So in the gate it works the exact opposite way. What we do is we only change signals which are below a certain threshold. So what we do is, signals below a certain threshold, we turn them down even more or make them complete, or we can also turn them off completely. So here we again have a signal graph similar to the one I've showed you in the compressors video. And what this signal graph shows is again a input level, which is the blue curve here. So we see at the beginning the input level is below the threshold, which is this one here, and at a certain point it surpasses the threshold. So when the input level is below that threshold, the gate closes. And we can literally imagine the gate to be like a door, and it either lets pass the signal or it doesn't let pass the signal. So as the signal is below the threshold, the signal cannot pass the gate, so it is turned down. And as soon as the input level goes above the threshold, the gate starts to open and it lets the signal pass. So there is also, as with the compressor, there is an attack time, and the attack time defines how fast the signal is basically passing through the gate until it reaches the input level. At the point where the signal drops again below the threshold, we do have the hold parameter, which basically says how long does it take for the gate to close again. So we will keep the signal on for the hold time, and then for the release time, or during the release time, we basically turn down the signal again. This is when the gate closes again. So there is always a range also we can define. We don't have to entirely switch off the signal, we just can also turn it down by a few dB. So the range normally is in dB. So what do we need this thing for? What would be applications for gates? Probably the most important application is to reduce audio bleed. Let's take a drum. You might have a snare drum and a kick drum, and the snare drum, like the beats of the snare drum, can also be heard on the mics from the kick drum. Of course, the snare drum will be much more quiet on the kick drum than the kick drum itself, because the mic is close to the kick drum. So this is where we can use the noise gate. Because our goal actually is to only hear the kick drum on the kick drum mics. So what we can do is we can turn down the snare, which is also on the kick drum a little bit, or we can entirely switch off the snare signal on the kick drum mics. So the snare signal might be coming in here, and we have to set the threshold over that snare signal which is coming into the kick drum mic, and this would then basically be the point where the kick drum hits. So then the level would basically be above the threshold, so we could hear the kick drum signal again, and when the kick drum, like the beat of the kick is finished, it drops below the threshold again, so we would turn off any other noise, snare sound or whatever coming in here. So I think the gate is a pretty important thing to reduce audio bleed, to reduce signals coming in from other sources which we don't want to have in the mic. So again, here you can see an overview of the noise gate and the different parameters. So first we got the threshold. You define at what volume, like below what volume you want to reduce the volume. And here, when we come to these parameters, you always have to think that we start at a closed gate. So if there is no sound at all, the gate is closed because we're always below the threshold. And the attack means how long does it take when the signal surpasses the threshold until the gate opens. So we always have to see this from the perspective of a closed gate. How long does it take until it opens? So attack time is how long does it take until the gate opens, and the signal can pass. Release time is then the gate was open. How long does it take until it is fully closed again? And the hold time is basically at the point where the signal goes below the threshold line. How long will we keep the input level until we close the gate again? And the range is basically just the amount of dB we reduce the input level when the gate closes. So basically we can have a closed gate, but there is still some input going through. I normally use a range of like infinity. Basically, I normally just switch off any audio bleed completely, but there might be use cases where you still want to get through a little of the surrounding noises coming in. So that would be the range, how much you turn it down. So that's basically it. There is I also want to encourage you to check a few other videos on YouTube about compressors and gates, because there's plenty of good explanations with also good examples on how to set compressors and set gates. So I really want to encourage you to also watch these videos.